We don't know exactly what part agriculture will be expected to play in the national decarbonisation effort, but it's going to be substantial. A new report commissioned by the Irish Farmers Journal and carried out by consultancy firm KPMG tries to assess the impact of emission reductions on the economy and on individual farmers. Here's Conor McMorrow with the details.
The study has found the impact of reducing carbon emissions varies across the agricultural sectors, with the viability of the beef, dairy and sheep sectors at most risk from livestock reductions. The dairy and beef sectors together account for 63% of agricultural emissions. If there is a 13% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030, economic output would actually go up by over €31 million. Net farm income would increase by €5,100 for dairy farmers and €200 for beef farmers. There would be no cut to the national herd under this scenario. If carbon emissions were reduced by 18% by 2030, economic output for agriculture would still go up by €59 million. Net farm income would increase by €2,100 for dairy farmers, but decrease by €300 for beef farmers. And there would still be no cut to the national herd under this scenario. The study says farmers cannot deliver a reduction in emissions above 18% without serious consequences for jobs, economic output and a significant reduction in the national herd. It's been reported that agricultural emissions will need to fall by between 21 to 30% by 2030. With a 21% emissions reduction, economic output for agriculture would decrease by €621 million. The net income for each dairy farm would fall by €4,300 and by €1,200 for beef farmers. Under this scenario, the national herd would reduce by 6% for beef and 5% for the dairy herd. Looking at a 50% emissions reduction by 2030, economic output for agriculture would dramatically fall by 46% or €8.9 billion. Net income would collapse by €46,400 for dairy farmers and €5,600 for beef farmers. And under this scenario, the national herd would be almost halved, reducing by 47% for beef and 45% for the dairy herd.
Conor McMorrow reporting there. I'm now joined in studio by Justin McCarthy, editor of the Irish Farmers Journal. Thanks so much for being here this evening. Look, we all know agriculture is the biggest contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions, even at a maximum of 18%, Justin. Many people would say that's simply not going to be enough.
But Miriam, and that is one viewpoint, and I suppose what the KPMG report shows that we commissioned is that we have a technology roadmap that allows the sector to get to 18%. In other sectors, we've got a decarbonisation roadmap, but in the case of agriculture, the roadmap takes us as far as 18%, and that's based on new technologies and also the existing technologies being rolled out. And I think really, looking at your piece to VT before, I think the real challenge is, and Teagasc have identified this, in making sure that we use all the supports possible, the CAP support, the Minister's €150 million a year carbon fund, to get those technologies rolled out at farm level. And Miriam, it's a bit like trying to get urban people out of their cars on the public transport. We have to encourage farmers to bring these technologies onto their farm.
And you mentioned there the biggest challenge. Many people will say the biggest challenge is the size of the national herd. Like dairy and beef accounts for 63% of all agriculture emissions, and yet it's the nettle no Irish government will grab.
And I suppose, Mary, our reasoning for commissioning KPMG to do this report was to inform the debate with the facts, form policymakers with the facts, and form, I suppose, commentators with the facts. And you're right. We have the technology to get to 18%. If government come out with a roadmap that is beyond the 18%, the only tool that we do have in the toolbox at present is to reduce the national herd. And as the KPMG report shows, for example, if government were to set that target at 30%, we would have to reduce the national herd by 25%. It would reduce farm incomes by up to 30%, hit the rural economy by €4 billion and loss up to 50,000 jobs. And the real question, Miriam, is how farmers, like every other aspect of society, they're going to have to incur the costs of other sectors decarbonising, but they cannot pass that cost on like the energy sector, and we're seeing that in energy prices at the minute.
Fair enough, though of course the government will point out that CAP have committed $10 billion to try and offset the cost of this for farmers, and the government itself has said $1.5 billion will go from carbon tax to ease the pain for farmers.
But Miriam, it's very important to understand the context of those figures. Those figures are over 5 years. The carbon tax is €150 million per year. The figures KPMG show us is farm incomes alone will be hit by €2 billion per annum. So the cap is dwarfed. The cap and the carbon fund, Miriam, will be needed to help farmers deploy the latest technologies, because there will be upfront capital costs required. The cap is no way a compensation mechanism in terms of the potential consequences of a major reduction to the national herd. Miriam, we have seen it before. You wouldn't take a car of a taxi driver without compensating them. We haven't taken trawlers of fishermen without compensating them. Yet some people think we should take cows away from farmers without compensation.
Are you saying that you don't believe any of the national herd should be cut?
Mary, it's not what I believe. The KPMG report shows if we go above 18%, the national herd will be required to be cut. That will come at a huge economic cost to farmers.
You'll have to go ahead of 18% for you to meet any of the targets that are going to be set.
But certainly, Miriam, if we go ahead of 18%, given what the KPMG report shows, it would be a miss of government, Miriam, that is mandated under the Climate Act to ensure climate justice, to come out with a target above 18% without any financial framework indicating how farmers are going to be compensated for that.
This report has a lot about, the costs, about the problems, but is it also a moment for perhaps opportunity?
Of course it is, Miriam, and I think there's a real opportunity in terms of developing CAP policy and in terms of deploying the €150 million per annum to help farmers become, and farmers are willing, Miriam, to become part of the climate solution. They can get to this 18%, but it's not farmers' fault that the technology will only get them that far. And look, there may be further down the line, Miriam, new technologies that we don't actually know yet, but to set a budget, and a legally binding budget, Miriam, that's going to form part of a legally binding pathway to reduce our emissions under the Climate Act, to set a budget that's beyond the current technology in the hope that some new technology will emerge is not what you would call climate justice.